One of the most common problems I see is people having difficulty staying in posture during their backswing. So what I mean by that is that when I'm setting myself up, my upper body's tilted forward here at the start of the swing. When I turn in my backswing, if my body changes or my spine changes, it's a really common thing. Now, it throws off your swing path. It means that you're going to have to make compensating moves to get the club back to the ball correctly in the downswing, and it can play havoc with hitting good shots. Let's have a look today at what we can do to recognise, first of all, whether or not posture has changed and what we can do about it. So it's really related to the body turning and the body tilting, especially upper body. Lower body definitely is involved as well, because that plays a big part in it. But if we have a look at what the upper body does, when I'm setting myself up, my upper body is tilted forward, sort of roughly around 40 degrees, maybe slightly under, maybe slightly over, depending on height and the club that I'm using. When I turn back to the end of my backswing, I want my shoulders to rotate at roughly 90 degrees angle to my spine. So from here, if I rotate back, my spine should appear to be tilted the same as it was at the start. This is obviously from a two-dimensional image. It's rotated. The tilt has actually changed, but if we're looking at it from a two-dimensional, it's easy to understand. So turn back to the top of my swing, and my shoulders should be at right angles. Now, when I rotate my shoulders, I want to feel that I'm not independently moving my shoulders as I turn. So if I'm standing completely upright and just turn to face away to my right, then I'll rotate my torso and my shoulders will just turn. So as I turn sideways, I wouldn't sort of lift one shoulder or the other. I just rotate everything as a unit. When I'm swinging the golf club, I want to do the same thing. So as the club goes back, I'm rotating my shoulders as a single unit. So I'm not adding tension. I'm not getting any shrugging movement with my right shoulder here. I'm not trying to pull my left shoulder down as I'm going back and through. I'm controlling the movement through the middle of my body here as I go back. Now, a couple of checkpoints. One is that when I rotate through to the end of my backswing, if I'm holding this club across my shoulders here, the club's pointed out somewhere around about the distance that I am tall. So, a metre and a half or a little bit more than a metre and a half, or that's going to be for 4 to 5 feet out in front of me there. So as I'm turning back, 4 or 5 feet in front, or it's roughly a metre and a half in front of me. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're not actually measuring it, but what you can see if you're looking from this view here in your reflection is whether or not you're doing that. The second thing as I go back is if I turn my hips, when I'm turning to here, because my upper body's tilted forward, my left hip is now lower than my right hip. And if my hips turn too level, then I can't do anything with my shoulders. So we've got to get the shoulders and the hip turning and tilting as a unit. My shoulders will tilt more than my hips will, but they have to work together when I'm turning back. So the first thing to do is to practice the movement, and when I'm turning back, I feel like from here, I'm getting that sense of my shoulders and my hips turning and tilting as I go back. Now, I mentioned before that the tilt does change. When I set myself up, my body's tilted forward and my spine's reasonably vertical. Might be a tiny bit off vertical, but reasonably vertical. When I turn back to the top of the swing, my body, as I'm turning back, is actually moving this way as well. So if I just put a rotation in there, now I'm in the top of the backswing. And that's one of the things that makes this movement tricky, because we're talking about it in 3 dimensions. When I get to the end of my backswing, my body has leaned this way as well as rotated to the end of my backswing. When I go the other way, the opposite's going to occur. So my body will straighten up and actually move the other way, so that by the time I reach impact, my body's tilted the other way. So getting this sense of the body tilting sideways as it's rotating in order for it to appear to be centered. So I turn back and I turn through, and my body appears to be reasonably centered as I've gone through. It is a unique movement to golf, and it does take a little bit of practice, but the best way of practicing it is to observe what you're doing. So if you're watching from face on here, I can set myself up and I'm looking for movement. I've got some movement through my hips, sort of sideways, especially in the downswing portion, but my head is actually staying pretty steady. If I'm not controlling this movement here, then my head can start to move around. It might lift if I lose my posture. It might go forward if I don't have the sequence of movement correct. So it's a good idea to just practice it slowly in front of a mirror, looking front on like this. And then from here, you can also watch from side on. So as I'm turning back and I'm getting that tilting and turning coordination, does it appear that my spine has stayed leaning over the same amount? When I start to go the other way, I'm moving back. So now as I'm approaching impact, I sort of look like I was at address. In other words, my body's still leaning forward. My body will sort of come back to somewhere approximating what address was. It's definitely not the same because of the timing of the rotations. So if I play this shot here, and I'll look to retain my posture as I move back, and through. So when I'm turning back and through, again, just getting that sense of movement. Once I've got that feeling of freedom of motion, then I'll increase the range that I'm moving through and increase the speed. But you're going to be doing the same or applying the same principle with every shot you play. So whether I'm playing a little chip shot, I'm controlling my posture. A pitch, I'm controlling my posture. A drive, same thing. So practice that. Observe what you're doing so that you can actually keep an eye on the control that you're developing. Do it slowly, do it at different speeds, do it with different clubs, and you'll find that when you do that, you'll find you'll have so much more control of your motion.